Hello! In this video, we will complete a practice map for an example field study site. You will need to follow the same directions for your own field study site. In order to create your practice map, you will need the following materials. Page 6 of your field study packet, the field study mapping practice worksheet. You can get a copy of this form from me in class or from my website. You'll need a pencil, a blue colored pencil, a ruler, a calculator, access to Google Maps, and a copy of the topographic map symbols key. This can also be found on my website. Pause this video and collect your materials. Now that you have all of your materials, we can begin creating our map. For this practice, we will be using the same field study site that we used to write our practice site overview. Let's look at our directions on page 6 of the field study packet. It says that the first thing we need to do is title our map. Your title must be descriptive. It should not be something like my field study site. Let's title our practice map Redwood Marsh. This name indicates both its location, near Redwood High School, and the type of area it is, a marsh. Write Redwood Marsh on the practice worksheet next to the heading Map Title. The next instruction on page 6 asks for us to create a scale. This is the most difficult part of creating your field study map. In order to find our scale, the first thing we must do is figure out the shape and dimensions of our field study site. In the second paragraph of your site overview, you have already done this. You should have described the shape and dimensions of your site. For the practice site, we described our site as a quadrilateral. This shape and its dimensions are illustrated by the red line drawn on the picture. I would recommend taking a picture of your own site, like the one we're using here. That will make it easier for you when you are creating your own map at home. Now that we have our dimensions and shape of our site, we can begin to calculate our scale. To calculate the scale, we are going to use the same rules we used when calculating the scale for a graph. However, we are going to need to calculate a scale for both the x and y axis. You should copy down the steps for calculating the scale on the back of your mapping practice worksheet. The first step in calculating the scale is to count the number of boxes. So take a minute and count how many boxes make up the x-axis and how many make up the y. Pause this video while you count. After counting, you should have found that there are 32 boxes for the x-axis and 20 boxes for the y-axis. Write these numbers next to step 1 on the back of your practice sheet. Your practice sheet should look like the slide showing now. Next, we will need to find our largest dimension for both the x and y direction. Looking back to the picture of our field study site, what is the biggest length that you see in the x direction? It's this length here, 85 meters. Write this in step 2 for the x scale calculation. What about in the y direction? What's the largest dimension here? The largest dimension is going to be 50 meters on the right hand side here. So let's write that for step 2 in our y column. You may be wondering why we didn't use the length of the slanted line over here. We didn't use this because the slanted line travels both in the x direction and the y direction. The length that it travels in this y direction actually equals 50 meters, which is the same distance as this line on the right hand side over here. Now that we have both the number of squares and the distance for both the x and y directions, we can calculate how many meters per square our scale should be. To do this, we just divide number 2, the distance, by number 1, the number of boxes. For the x-axis, this gives us 2.66 meters per square, and for the y-axis, that gives us 2.5 meters per square. Write these numbers next to step 3. Our next step in finding the scale is to round our numbers to something that is easy to count by. 2.5 meters per square is relatively easy to count by. For example, we'd have 0, then 2.5, then 5, then 7.5, etc. So the y-axis is good to go. For the x-axis, 2.66 would be pretty difficult to count by, so we're going to need to round. Thinking back to our rules for graphing, you should remember that we always round up. This ensures that we can fit all of our graph onto our graph paper. In this case, we'd probably round 2.66 up to 3. These rounded values go in step 4. For completing our map, we need to look at the numbers we got for step 4 for both the x and the y, and we need to choose the largest number. This is going to be the number that we use for our scale in both the y direction and the x direction. We use the same number for both directions because if we didn't, our map would appear either stretched or squished in one direction. For our map, we are going to choose the number 3 for our scale. By choosing the number 3, we are saying that each box on our map is worth 3 meters. So next to the heading that says scale, we can write 1 box equals 3 meters by 3 meters, which equals 9 meters squared. Now that we have our scale, we can begin drawing the outline for our map. When we are done, the outline should look exactly like the outline shown here on the field study picture. When you are drawing the outline of your map, you want to start in one corner of the map. The best way to choose that corner is to match up one 90-degree angle at your field study site. We're going to use this one here, with a 90-degree angle on the grid. For our map, we're going to start at the bottom right-hand corner. This is where we are going to start counting from. Start by counting by 3s across the x-axis, so across the x-axis here, towards the left. When you reach 65 meters, stop and draw a dot. Next, go back to the bottom right-hand corner and count up the y-axis, so right here, by 3s until you reach 50 meters. When you get there, stop and make another dot. From the second dot, we're going to count across the grid by 3s until you reach 85 meters. When you get there, you'll stop and make a third dot. Using a ruler, connect your dots. This is the outline of your map. It should look exactly like the outline drawn on the picture. Now that we have an outline, we can begin by filling in the map. Start by drawing the land-water boundary. This is where the land and water meet. You can draw this from the same perspective that you see it in the picture. So your land-water boundary is going to be right here. When you're done, your map should look something like this. Now we need to indicate what type of land we have at our site. To do this, we need to refer to the topographic map symbols that we used when we were looking at topographical maps earlier in the unit. This site is made up mostly of marsh, over here, a little bit of submerged marsh, and water. So we'll need to locate these symbols in our symbol sheet. We'll start with the marsh. Marsh is indicated by this symbol. Notice that the symbol is blue in color. This means that we will need to use our blue-colored pencil to draw in the marsh. First, begin by adding the symbol to our key. Be sure you both draw the symbol and label it. When you create your map for your site, you will also need to include a key. You can include your key in the extra space on the page or draw it on a separate piece of paper and staple it to page 6. Once you've added the marsh symbol into the key, you can begin by drawing the marsh into your map. You should draw the marsh symbol anywhere there is land. When you finish, your map should look similar to this. Now we can add in some submerged marsh. First, we need to identify the symbol for submerged marsh on our symbol sheet, and we need to add that symbol to the key on our map. The symbol looks like this. It is similar to the marsh symbol, but it is shaded blue. Once we've added it to our key, we can draw it onto our map. The submerged marsh occurs along the land-water boundary. When you've drawn it onto your map, it should look similar to this. The last thing we need to do is to shade in the water. When you look at the symbol sheet, you'll notice that bodies of water are shaded blue. Add this to your key and shade your water area blue. Your map should now look like this. Let's look back to the mapping instructions on page 6. So far, we've titled the map, created a scale, and we've taken care of the symbols as well as the key. Now let's finish up by completing the other points of the instruction. The third instruction asks us to note the compass direction. To note the compass direction, we are going to use an arrow to point in the direction of north. Draw this arrow next to the heading compass direction on your worksheet. Also write the word north, or a capital letter N, next to the head of the arrow. For our site, the right side of the picture, over here, is going to be the northern direction. So our arrow would look like this. The next instruction asks us to indicate the lowest and highest elevation at our site in both feet and meters. It's okay for you to approximate both the location and elevation of these 2 points at your site. For the practice site, I think the highest point is over here in the top right-hand corner, and the lowest point is over here in the water. I think the highest point is 6 meters high. That means it's about 18 feet. So I'm going to label it like this. I think the lowest point is 0 meters because it's at sea level. This means it's also 0 feet, so I'll label it like this. The next instruction says we need to label things like roads, trails, buildings, creeks, and other bodies of water, and things like that. We don't have any roads, trails, or buildings in the practice site, just a body of water, which is a creek. So the only thing that we need to label here is Corte Madera Creek. So we'll write that name in here. Remember, at your site you might have more than just a body of water to label. Also remember that you only need to label what you see. We're almost done. Only 2 things left to do. The first is to label latitude and longitude. There are 2 ways to do this. The first is to go to Google Maps and locate your field study site. So our field study site is right here. Click in the middle of your site, and the latitude and longitude will appear in the bottom of a box in the upper left-hand corner of your browser window. The first number listed is your latitude. Remember that latitude needs to be followed by either an N for north or an S for south. Since we are in the northern hemisphere, we will have an N for north. Write the latitude after the heading latitude at the bottom of the grid on your practice field study site worksheet. The second number listed is the longitude. It's right here. Longitude is followed by either an E for east or a W for west. We are in the western hemisphere, so we need to include a W. Write the longitude next to the heading that says longitude. The other way to find the latitude and longitude is to use the compass app on your phone. When you're at your field study site, open the app. It's located in the utilities folder on your phone, and follow the directions it gives you. The latitude and longitude will appear at the bottom of the app. The last thing that we need to do is indicate 4 landmarks, one north, south, east, and west of our field study site. You will write the names of these sites outside the boundary of your field study site on your map. You will need to choose a landmark that has some sort of permanency. In other words, something that will probably be here in the future, so don't use places like stores. Let's start with the west side of our field study site. In the background here you can see Mount Tam, so it would be a great landmark to indicate on the west side of our site. We'll write Mount Tam on the outside of the boundary of our site, and then we will need to indicate the distance between our site and the landmark, in this case Mount Tam. Redwood Marsh is about 1.5 miles from Mount Tam, so we'll write that next to the name. Marin General is a good landmark to indicate for north of our site, and it's about 1 mile away, so we'll write that down. East of our site is the freeway, so we'll label 101 freeway, and we'll write 0.5 miles next to that. Lastly, the Golden Gate Bridge is south of our site, and it will be around for a long time, so we'll write that down. It's about 8 miles away, so we'll include that too. Now our map should be complete. Let's do one last double check to make sure that we have everything. Map title, check. Scale, check. Compass direction, check. Latitude, longitude, check. Our symbols in our map look good. We've completed our key. We've indicated the highest and lowest elevations. We've named things in our site right here. And we've indicated landmarks on all 4 sides of our map. Our map is looking good. Now, using what you've practiced here, make a map of your own field study site. Remember to include a key either on a separate piece of paper or in the extra space around your map. Thanks for watching, and be sure to come and talk to me if you have any questions.